They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, July 25th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Zachary Foster, historian of Palestine and proprietor of the Palestine Nexus newsletter. He'll be with us to talk about Netanyahu's shameful speech to Congress yesterday. Also on the program today, Biden officially passes the torch in a primetime address last night, throwing his support behind Kamala Harris. Hundreds arrested in D.C., including families of members of Israeli hostages protesting Netanyahu. Roughly half of congressional Democrats boycotted the speech, but not Rashida Tlaib. On her birthday, she looked Netanyahu in the eye with a sign that said "guilty of genocide." Netanyahu brought Elon Musk as his date yesterday. The war criminal meets with Biden and then Harris today, who issues a wishy-washy statement about the protests. Speaking of Harris, she did not attend the speech, but polling shows an increase versus Trump in just a few days. Her biggest swing state deficit appears to be Arizona, but unsurprisingly, she surges past Biden and Trump with young voters. Inflation falls, GDP increases in Q2 of 2024. Those are good headlines for the Dems. Game developers at Activision Blizzard have voted to unionize.
Nice.
The FBI says the Trump gunman was searching for information on the JFK assassination before his attempt. Things like, how far was Oswald from JFK? The answer, very, very close. In his new book, Trump's nephew claims Trump said disabled people should, quote, just die. Is he a bad guy, Donald Trump? I don't know. Yes. The Senate passes the Defiance Act, potentially allowing people to sue over non-consensual sexually explicit deepfakes. AOC spearheading this in the House, also a victim of a lot of these deepfakes. And lastly, a super typhoon hit Southeast Asia, killing over a dozen in Taiwan, and the Philippines made landfall in South China today. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is an Majority Report Thursday. We're in a much better place than we were last Thursday, although, hey, it's interesting to see Kamala Harris. I think, as I've mentioned, I'm enthusiastic, but I'm just like a passionate, excitable person, and I love the contrast with her and Trump. But we're going to start to see her pivot towards the center a bit, because the polling weaknesses apparently that she is that are coming out is that she's perceived as too liberal and perceived as bad on immigration. And so the thing about that is that I think that will be
the things Dems are always ready to believe about themselves.
Right. I mean, look, they ran about how Obama was way too liberal in 2008, and that was also a time when Democrats, I think, had the negative partisanship on their side to less of a degree now, because obviously Trump's not the incumbent in the way Bush was, and the economy was collapsing, and the war was an absolute travesty. So Obama's conditions were better than what Harris has been given. But I hope she doesn't get cowed by that. The VP pick will say a lot about that. Basically, cheat sheet for people. We don't want Josh Shapiro, who is pro-charter school, was extremely aggressive in trying to crack down on the anti-genocide protests. Mark Kelly was at the Netanyahu address yesterday and just endorsed the PRO Act literally yesterday.
Please.
There were already 48 Democrat co-sponsors. He was one of,
he sunk
3.
He's responsible for, he's one of the few people responsible for it not being law. So it's too late.
Right. My concern is that she will pick him because of Arizona, but her path to victory, I think there's 2 ways she can go. She could go for a Rust Belt strategy that includes Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and her poll numbers in Wisconsin are already significantly improving, and in Michigan, and in Pennsylvania. So I hope she goes that route, because there's also encouraging signs in Georgia and and North Carolina. If she wants to go with Cooper, she wants to go with Bashir, fine, down, love it. Ideologically, Walz would be my pick, and I think if she wants to center childcare, which she seems to indicate, and her record shows that is something that she may bring to the forefront of her campaign, then Walz is a great ideological fit for that.
Also, he's crushing it in the media right now. If I do say
rocks.
so,
yeah,
as a representative of the Upper Midwest.
So, the 2 we really don't want, in terms of trying to make sure this is a more progressive presidency, or at least not depressing the base at this point, is Shapiro and Kelly. But let's turn to the VP that has been selected here, J.D. Vance. Lots of reported regret from the Trump campaign because Vance is polling horribly. After the convention,
Historically bad.
Historically. He already was a bad pick because he didn't have enthusiasm in his home state. Trump and Governor DeWine, 2 Republicans, outperformed J.D. Vance in that state, even though Ohio has been trending red and is fairly deeply red at this point for quite a few years and election cycles. So he's just not a talented politician. He's a bag man. He's close with Peter Thiel. He's made a lot of money himself. And Donald Trump can't spend all of his campaign funds that he's raising on just campaigning. He has to also pay his lawyers because of the legal battles that he's in. So money and big money donors are of the essence. So he picked a charisma suck, and also a guy who, as this gets more mainstreamed, I think it's going to be really off-putting for their core constituency that they need to win over of suburban female voters. J.D. Vance has made just a bunch of weird comments about women, about families. Some are getting unearthed. We played for you him telling Tucker Carlson in 2021 or 2022 that we couldn't turn over our country to liberals like Kamala Harris, who were, quote, childless cat ladies. That prompted Jennifer Aniston, of all people, to speak out this morning.
Oh, damn.
They're getting, the liberal celebrities being on
They're
board.
activating celebrities we didn't even know got involved in politics.
Yeah, this is super Obama 08 in that way. And
David Arquette's gonna come through.
right. And this those were the comments that we played for you the other day, which were insane. But this was an old speech. Where was this, Bradley?
It's like the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. It's a William F. Buckley founded organization.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Delaware.
What kind of front organization is this?
Right. So this is just was giving a speech 2 years ago, and he has this policy idea for families. Let's hear him out.
Democrats are talking about giving the vote to 16-year-olds, but let's do this instead.
No, they're not.
Let's give votes to all children in this country, but let's give control over those votes to the parents of those children. When you go to the polls in this country as a parent, you should have more power. you should have more of an ability to speak your voice in our democratic republic than people who don't have kids. Let's face the consequences and the reality. If you don't have as much of an investment in the future of this country, maybe you shouldn't get nearly the same voice. Now, people will say, and I'm sure the Atlantic and the Washington Post and all the usual suspects will criticize me about this in the coming days. Well, doesn't this mean that non-parents don't have as much of a voice as parents? Doesn't this mean that parents get a bigger say in how our democracy functions? Yes, absolutely.
So I want to read this excerpt here from the progress report, Jordan Zacharian, about the roots of this movement. I've been talking about natalism on this program for a while. Elon Musk also subscribes to it. He believes in spreading his DNA around the world, and
around his staff.
Yeah, and usually, right. And usually that means the white people and heterosexual people populating the earth. But this is where this originates from. A new paper previewed in the Koch-owned libertarian-flavored Reason magazine advances the idea that parents should be able to cast votes on behalf of their children, and that states have the power to authorize it. Here's a bit from the abstract. Children are 23% of all citizens. They have distinct interests, and they already count for electoral districting, but they lack the maturity to vote for themselves. Their interests don't count proportionally at the polls. Can we pull this up here? The result is policy that observably disservices children's interests and violates a deep principle of democratic fairness. That citizens through voting can make political power respond to their interests. And then Jordan writes, if this sounds ridiculous, the authors anticipated you would say that and came up with an offensive rebuttal from the intro. Today, it's so unquestioned that even pointing it out can seem like a silly provocation rather than a serious policy proposal. Deep assumptions are like that. Questioning them always seems crazy at first. The suggestion that women should be allowed to vote once spurred derision, until wave upon wave of challenging assumptions produced the 19th Amendment. Of course, there's a crucial difference. Unlike the women who demanded their right to vote, children really are incompetent to vote for their interests, at least at a sufficiently young age. One might disagree whether 18 is the right line, but surely something is. 8-year-olds aren't competent to vote for their interests. So our claim is that children should be able to, isn't that children should be able to vote from birth. Our claim is that their parents should cast votes for them. Now, the point is that they already do. If children are unable to vote for their interests when they're 8 years old, the parents are voting for policies that, in theory at least, benefit them. What J.D. Vance and these natalists are trying to argue is that government policy should count people who have more children more than people who are single by giving them multiple votes per child. Almost like, I don't know,
how about 3/5 of a
the
vote?
3/5 compromise, right? Like if you have some people who, are employed by you, but don't
are owned by you,
right? But you don't pay them.
What if he says it in terms of investment, which I think is the big giveaway. Why not? I mean, people who invest are own companies, and shouldn't they be able to cast a vote for every one of their employees?
Well, I mean, I mentioned Elon Musk earlier. Is there any kind of way to enforce, say, if you're like a tech vampire like Elon, you get rich, you have a bunch of kids, and then you abandon them?
Yeah,
do you still get to vote? Does he still get 10 extra votes because he has 10 kids that he doesn't ever see or worry about?
It would give him a reason to claim them.
Well, it would in theory, but you don't need to design the policy that way. But would that apply to, say, like the non-heterosexual people or minorities? This is the group that Republicans continuously, especially black people in this country, say is affected by the plight of fatherlessness. Do you think that an Elon Musk or a wealthy guy under a natalist Republican empire would treat the random guy who maybe doesn't have a relationship with his kids or with the mother the same way in terms of giving that person more votes versus the rich guy who has all the resources in the world? Or would it be contingent on the promulgation and preservation of a certain kind of family?
Sean Kemp versus the Duggar family. Also, speaking of ISI, that place he was speaking at there, and Trump distancing himself from Project 2025. ISI is a member of the advisory board of Project 2025, a collection of conservative and right-wing policy proposals from the Heritage Foundation to reshape United States federal government and consolidate executive power should the Republican nominee win the 2024 presidential election.
There's more on this theory being rooted in conservatives who have power. Jordan continues. The author of this paper is named Stephen E. Sachs, who once clerked for Chief Justice John Roberts and now serves as the Antonin Scalia Professor of Law at Harvard Law School. He is a right-wing conservative who won a prestigious award from the Federalist Society in 2020 and claims an expertise in originalism, the nimblest of legal theories. We have which contorts itself to always arrive at whichever outcome a conservative jurist so desires. There's every likelihood he could wind up as a federal judge and perhaps one day a Supreme Court justice. Why would conservatives like Sachs want to give parents an extra vote for each of their children? Sachs cites fellow Yale Law graduate J.D. Vance as a supporter of the pseudo-children's suffrage idea. And Vance is a key leader of the nascent Peter Thiel-funded New Right movement, which sprinkles a bit of populism over a Christian nationalist ideology that seeks to make the, quote, traditional family the center of American life. The natalist movement overlaps with the New Right. Some may be atheists, but they also fear the Great Replacement theory and seek to secure their cultural future through procreation. Members of the movement would likely benefit from most of these policies, both financially and politically, giving them exponential strength in numbers. So, like Viktor Orban, who they're borrowing from here, this is a way to say, like, hey, we're going to use policies that seem like they're for the social benefit and giving tax breaks and benefits to families, but not in the way that Kamala Harris and Biden envisioned via the expanded child tax credit, which is payments to alleviate child poverty. No. We will give outsized political power and voting power to certain kinds of families the more they breed certain kinds of children. Now I ask J.D. Vance and the Trump campaign once again, this was your strategy to appeal to suburban women? You're not going to give, like, families that are struggling to get by, say if they have 4 kids, right? Say they're a conservative family and they're religious and they didn't believe in birth control and they have kids and it's hard for them to make ends meet. You're going to give them, like, an extra vote? Or could you directly give them benefits and financial assistance in the way that the child tax credit did before Joe Manchin killed it and other Republicans, the entire Republican Party? Or could you give them a way to alleviate their own poverty, alleviate child poverty, as that expanded child tax credit did? 45% of children lifted out of poverty just by expanding that program. And I'm encouraged to see that Harris is seemingly adopting that into her platform as well.
What color were they? He doesn't care about that. Universal daycare is class war against normal people, said J.D. Vance.
Yes. This is a tweet that he had back in 2021. Universal childcare is a massive subsidy to the lifestyle preferences of the affluent over the preferences of the middle and working class. Now, it appears that that's also something that Harris may want to run on. This is a classic right-wing trope, by the way. Programs that are universal, which makes them more durable, like Medicare, like Social Security, everyone gets them no matter their income level. Those are programs that have sustainability. So making, like, does universal kindergarten, does universal high school, do public high schools act as a subsidy to the lifestyle preferences of the affluent over the preferences of the middle and working class? Because anybody can go to a public school because they pay taxes? That's the same thing with universal childcare, buddy. You got to risk the imagination of a new possibility. I'm joking, but this is what the Republicans have to offer. We'll give outsized voting benefits to the people that we like, white people who are heterosexual, and then we will say that all the programs that could help everybody more broadly are actually against your interests, when in reality we know that creating durable, long-standing programs like this uplifts people. And so I'm hoping we go in that direction. I'm hoping more people see this, because I don't think this appeals to suburban women in the way the Trump campaign may like, and perhaps they're regretting it. All right, folks, quick break, and when we come back, we are going to be talking to Zachary Foster about Netanyahu's speech, what's happening in Gaza and Israel, and more. We are back, and we are joined once again by Zachary Foster, historian of Palestine, proprietor of the Palestine Nexus newsletter, where Zach and others, historians, archive a lot of material on Palestine that people want to erase. Zach, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, Emma. Thanks so much for having me.
So yesterday was a horrible day. Seeing, like, I don't feel patriotic a lot. It's just not in my nature. But I feel like a reflexive patriotism when I see this genocidal maniac speaking in my hall of Congress. Like, I don't know what your visceral reaction was to seeing that guy there, but after everything, it just made me sick to my stomach.
I've never been so ashamed to be an American citizen. Here we have our elected representatives cheering on, applauding, standing ovations for a leader of a country actively engaged in genocidal acts, according to UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. According to the ICJ, it's carrying out a plausible genocide. According to the ICC, we have requests for arrest warrants for both Netanyahu and his defense minister for carrying out war crimes. And this is the guy we're giving a standing ovation to? These are our elected representatives? It's absolutely disgusting.
It was horrible to see, and we'll get to the speech in a second, but I think, to our discredit, to be honest, and I can get wrapped up in these things as well, Gaza has fallen out of the news in a way that it shouldn't, because the atrocities really ramped up during this time period. After Biden's debate and all the speculation for weeks about him dropping out, that was really the thing that dominated the news cycle. And at that time, Israel was escalating the genocide in Gaza because they do this notably when they know the American public is distracted. Netanyahu has bragged in the past about being able to manipulate the American public. And they, during this news cycle, bombed multiple United Nations schools in manners of days. Polio and disease is spreading. Starvation is all over Gaza. And this was in the midst of the supposed ceasefire negotiations, which have fallen apart, I don't know, dozens, many times. We could just go through, like, Bradley prepares us news packets every day. And for the past 10 months, the negotiations are close. They're so close. Oh, they've fallen apart again. And it usually is the result of, like, something getting leaked to the press, or Israel committing an act of violence that throws things off its axis. And we know through Haaretz's reporting that Netanyahu is leaking things to the press, and people believe he's deliberately sabotaging the negotiations. So that's where we are right now. If you don't mind elaborating, Zach.
Yeah, we had a report just a few days ago in the Jerusalem Post, which I would describe as a pro-apartheid, pro-genocide publication that generally speaks relatively positively of Netanyahu. The title of a Jerusalem Post article just a few days ago was, Netanyahu is himself actively sabotaging attempts to reaching a ceasefire and a hostage deal. And this is something we've known for months. We've known for months that Netanyahu's coalition will collapse in the event that he reaches a ceasefire deal. We know that because his coalition, which includes Bezalel Smotrich, which includes Itamar Ben-Gvir, we're talking about the most right-wing fascist elements in Israeli society. We're talking about people who are self-declared fascists and homophobes. That's Smotrich. People who have been convicted on charges of terrorism. That's Ben-Gvir. These are the people he's sitting in a cabinet with. He's sitting in a coalition with. They have declared openly, if there's a ceasefire, we will bring down the government. So we've known for 9 months that there's no chance there will be a ceasefire, because a ceasefire means the end of the Netanyahu government. And an end of the Netanyahu government means he will go back to facing his criminal prosecution charges. Currently, he has 3 outstanding cases for bribery, corruption, and breach of public trust. And it's quite likely that he will be convicted of those charges and he will go to prison. So for Netanyahu, it's either I go to prison or I continue the war. Mm-hmm. So of course the war will continue.
And those facts have been clear since October 8th, since prior to October 7th as well. Like, just by the way that the coalition was formed. Netanyahu formed his majority with the far right. So by its very nature, he is beholden to them, even though I know it's his ideology as well. But even if you want to have some starry-eyed view of what his incentives are here, the Biden administration should have known from the get-go that he would not end these genocidal acts because of the self-interest that you describe. And within Israeli society, I know there have been a lot of protests in Tel Aviv and other urban centers, but the settler class of Israelis, the people that want to expand even further into the West Bank and steal more land and take Gaza and develop on that land, they make up a part of Israeli society that doesn't get covered in the way that these large-scale protests in cities do, but they have a lot of power here as well.
They are the ones making all the key decisions over Palestinian life, over the lives of 5 million Palestinians. You have, in the past few months, the Israeli government, led by Smotrich, has transferred over the authority of the civilian settlements in the occupied West Bank. That authority has been transferred over from the Israeli military to the civilian administration led by Finance Minister Smotrich. So we're no longer talking about a case of apartheid de jure. We're no longer talking about a case of apartheid in practice. We're talking about a case of apartheid on paper. The government of Israel, the civilian government of Israel, is controlling the lives of 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank. That is now a fact. They have the concept of a military occupation is that the military makes the key decisions. That is no longer the case in the West Bank. There's not even a facade of an occupation anymore. There's the facade of occupation has been transformed into a reality of de jure apartheid.
And that is because, just to elaborate on your point, Netanyahu transferred the power to Smotrich and his gang of thugs, essentially, saying that this is, not a military operation. This is basically a formalized expansionist land seizure that's done not just by maintaining the slow rolling of seizure of land, but also deploying these extremists to do so in practice in the West Bank as we speak.
Over the past 9 months, we've seen more settler violence than at any point in all of Israeli history. There have been more than 1,500 Palestinians who have been ethnically cleansed from their communities in the West Bank. We're talking about more than a dozen communities in the West Bank who have been expelled, ethnically cleansed from their villages in Turmas Aya, in Khan al-Ahmar, in the South Hebron Hills, in Ain Samia, in Homsa in the northern West Bank. Wherever you go in the West Bank, there are violent settler Israeli radicalists who are engaging in terrorism not on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. And those settlers have direct support from ministers sitting in Netanyahu's government. That is who's in charge in Israel right now.
Right. And can you speak a little bit about more can you speak more to the desperation that Netanyahu may be feeling? Like he has his individual corruption and criminal prosecution to worry about within Israel. But, I am also interested in seeing reports of economic collapse within Israel. I know that many businesses have gone bankrupt, and of course there's been a huge drop-off in tourism, which Israel incentivizes through many programs like Birthright, but for other tourists as well. I know that there have been some victories for BDS, including Intel axing a $25 billion, I think it was a chips investment in Israel, and BDS touted that as a massive victory, agreed on that front. Like, what are some of the domestic economic pressures that he's facing?
I think there was a report that came out not too long ago suggesting that something like 60,000 Israeli businesses have gone under since October 7th. And this obviously makes a ton of sense, because who in the right mind wants to visit a country carrying out a genocide? So tourism has fallen off a cliff. We know that the tech sector, one of Israel's most important sectors, has seen a massive decline in foreign direct investment. Who wants to invest in a country's tech sector that is carrying out a genocide? We know that Israel it's a small country. It has a relatively small armed force. And so it has been forced over the past 9 months to call up tens of thousands of reservists. These are people who are extremely important to the Israeli economy. Every company is missing 10, 20, 30% of its workforce. How do you carry out normal operations of a business when you're missing so many of your employees? Not to mention, obviously, the Israeli bonds are now suffering, because who wants to buy the bonds associated with a country that is expending all of its financial resources on war? So I think the Israeli economy is suffering now, and it will continue to suffer. And this is just the beginning. I mean, people don't realize this. Genocide is a crime that doesn't go away. There are no statute of limitations on the warrants that the ICC is going to issue. There is no statute of limitations on the ICJ case. Right? This will follow Israel for the indefinite future, short of a complete overhaul and a complete removal of the entire ruling class in Israel, which is essentially unthinkable, because the ruling class has the support of the population. This is a popular war. The general public in Israel supports the war effort. So the idea that there would be a removal of the current power elite in Israel is essentially a total a pipe dream. So what we're talking about is a country and a political elite and an economy that will continue to get worse and worse and worse. As more countries cut off economic ties, as more countries stop recognizing Israeli passports, as fewer tourists go to travel to Israel, the country will continue to deteriorate, both from a legitimacy perspective, but also from an economic perspective.
And is there truth to a lot of Israelis who have dual citizenship? Definitely not a settler or colonial state. But of course, like is it true that a lot of them have left and are going back to countries where they also have citizenship?
Oh, there's no question that many Israelis have left. You have tens of thousands of Israelis in the north who have become effectively either internally displaced persons or refugees, right? Because they can't go to their homes, they don't feel safe, and they probably will never feel safe going back to their homes in the north. You have the Gaza envelope, where you have tens of thousands of Israelis in the south who are displaced, and many of them have left the country. Because who wants to live in a country that is actively engaged in a genocide, where you are going to be called up to reserve duty? You now have even reservists claiming they're no longer willing to serve in the IDF. I think the reports are real of Israelis leaving, and I think that is this is the beginning. I think you have to think of Israeli history as there's before 2023 and there's after 2023. The country we knew before October 7, 2023 is gone. We're never going back to it. The borders of the country have shrunk.
Right. And the point is that I do think, it's going to be a slow death of Zionism, but how many Palestinians are slaughtered and suffer and lose limbs and are given irrevocable injuries for the rest of their lives in the process. Patton from Ohio writes in, question for the guests: people were speculating that the recent Israeli Supreme Court decision to require ultra-Orthodox Jews to be conscripted would lead to the collapse of Bibi's ruling coalition. Is that a possibility?
So it seems unlikely that this would lead to the collapse of the coalition, because Netanyahu is very careful about his approach to conscripting the ultra-Orthodox. He's not a fool. He understands that if tomorrow he declares all 100 or 200,000 ultra-Orthodox young men need to enlist, that will obviously cause him problems at home. So his approach has been piecemeal. It has been, let's take baby steps. It has been, let's first issue conscription orders to those ultra-Orthodox men who are not sitting in a religious seminary and studying religious texts all day, but let's issue those conscription orders to those Israeli ultra-Orthodox men who are already in the workforce. So he's taking a careful approach here. So I don't expect this to bring down the coalition, no.
And have there not been previous Supreme Court rulings within Israel that tried to force the ultra-Orthodox into conscription, that basically they just kind of get around it regardless for political purposes?
There have been previous attempts to conscript them, and they've always failed. I mean, the ultra-Orthodox are dead set on their opposition to serving in the Israeli army. For many within the ultra-Orthodox community, including 100,000 Satmar Hasidim, the Israeli state is an abomination. It's in Judaism it would be known as Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name, because it's presenting Judaism. It's kind of outwardly facing. It is claiming to be a Jewish state, but it's carrying out all these grotesque acts of violence, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, genocide. So it's defaming Judaism, which is an abomination.
Right. And what do you think about the news about Hamas and Fatah coming together and coming to an agreement based on, again, China brokering this, which they seem to be really taking advantage of the United States being just demonically supportive of Israel right now?
There's so much to say here. There have been many attempts in the past between Fatah and Hamas, going back to 2005, 6, 7, to form a kind of a unity government. Almost every single one of those attempts was sabotaged either by Israel or the United States. Israel and the United States know that any kind of coalition that includes Hamas will require Israel to make real concessions, will require Israel to actually withdraw from the occupied territories, to actually end its policy of taking Palestinian hostages. It will require Israel to actually give Palestinian sovereignty in East Jerusalem, to actually come up with a just resolution to the refugee issue. And Israelis know that. So any attempt to bring Hamas into the PLO, to create these unity governments between Fatah and Hamas, these are always sabotaged by Israel. And by the way, I don't mean to let Mahmoud Abbas off the hook here. He has played an active role in sabotaging these attempts himself. He has not shared power at all. He was elected 16 years ago and hasn't held an election since. He's an autocrat. Abbas is obviously an obstacle. Israel is obviously an obstacle. The United States is obviously an obstacle. But this is a very positive development. We've known for a long time that if there's ever going to be some kind of political settlement, some kind of negotiated resolution, it has to involve all Palestinian political parties. You can't end the violence without bringing to the table the people causing the violence. So this is a necessary precondition, and that's why it's absolutely shameful to see Mahmoud Abbas continually sabotage these agreements by not sharing power, and even more shameful to see the United States and Israel sabotage what is obviously the only hope for a negotiated settlement.
Well, they've been trying to factionalize the Palestinians in Gaza and the Palestinians in the West Bank and having different authorities for this very reason, right? To prevent solidarity and I mean, that's in part also the geographic segmenting, but it's also the political segmenting to make sure that they can have more and more time to take more and more land, kill more and more people, and expand Israel's boundaries. That's been modus operandi for Israel.
Palestinian unity is a nightmare for Israel, okay? Palestinian unity means that there's actually, you have a real partner for peace. You have someone you actually have to talk to. You can no longer make excuses. You can't pretend that, the problem is on the other side. So for decades, this policy goes back to the 1980s when Israel tried to drive a wedge between the PLO in exile and Palestinian groups in the occupied territories by funding and supporting PLO rivals. And it's a policy that Israel pursued in the 2000s and 2010s. When it actively supported and funded Hamas, it allowed Qatari officials to send tens of millions of dollars into the Gaza Strip every month to back up and support the Hamas government in Gaza, in order to drive a wedge between Hamas and Fatah for the reasons we just stated, that Palestinian unity is a nightmare for Israel, especially those in Israel who want total domination, who want to instrument and solidify Israel's apartheid regime in the West Bank and everywhere else in Israel.
Right. We have so far to go in terms of getting Israelis to maybe consider the fact that perhaps they could live alongside the millions of people that they have occupied, and we can all live in an integrated society. We shall see. I think it has to be obviously imposed upon them. But I appreciate all that backdrop, Zach, and all of the context that leads into this Netanyahu address yesterday. So shameful, horrific to see him in the United States. The protests where they apparently made him change rooms by shining a light onto the Watergate Hotel that had an image of Netanyahu that said arrest him, I believe. That's beautiful. Love to see those acts of solidarity. But it still is immensely disturbing that even though around half of Democrats in the Senate and in the House decided to boycott this speech, half still showed up. Half were there. Some of them giving standing ovations to this genocidal maniac. Let's start with where he opened his speech, or close to it. A refrain that he often returns to, that this is a clash between civilization and barbarism.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
Head fake.
It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life. For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
So you saw that standing ovation there. Before you weigh in, Zach, Ben Norton pointed this out on Twitter and posted these images. I think this is a key point here, just for people to understand what Zionism is. Ben writes, while committing genocide, every colonial regime has claimed it was defending civilization, by which it meant its hegemony and supremacism against barbarism, i.e. indigenous sovereignty. Mass murderer Netanyahu's colonial rhetoric is centuries-old, white man's burden BS. Let's show these images really quickly, Bradley. Yeah. So you can see civilization brandished, some more racist cartoons.
I mean, it's all
education.
Trevor meant.
Right. I mean, and then this last one, civilization versus barbarism. I mean, this is, we could zoom out here even. This is immensely clear. This is an old trope. Your reaction, Zach?
Israel has gone to great lengths. Netanyahu has gone to great lengths to align itself with history's most notoriously genocidal regimes. The rhetoric of civilization versus barbarism, well, we've all heard that before, like Ben Norton correctly pointed out. I mean, it's honestly insane that he would want to align himself with the kinds of colonial regimes that also have embraced the rhetoric of we are bringing civilization to the barbaric natives. But I think just more generally, I mean, he's correct to point out there is no moral equivalency between an apartheid state that has been carrying out a 57-year-long illegal, brutal military occupation on the one hand, and a group of stateless, impoverished people resisting that occupation on the other hand. That is what we have. It's actually pretty simple.
Right.
And he's right about that. There is barbarity. That is Israel, which has been denying millions and millions and millions of people for decades and decades basic human rights, the right to vote for the government that controls your life. Why don't they have that right? That's why Israel's an apartheid state, and that's why there's violence against it. So he's right to say that it's actually pretty simple, but he's just got the story backwards, right? It's his country that is slaughtering hundreds of Palestinians every single day for 9.5 months. That is literally the definition of barbarism. Okay. So I mean, I'm sure we'll be able to talk about more of his lies and his the misinformation he spread in that speech. But from beginning to end, it is just appalling to see a genocidal maniac get in front of the U.S. Congress and repeat lie after lie after lie and get standing ovations.
Yeah, it was sickening.
58 standing ovations.
58. And he walked in and snubbed Chuck Schumer with a handshake, by the way, after Schumer invited him. Humiliating.
Trump said Schumer's a Palestinian, so.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess so. So, which that's a whole nother bag. The Republican Party. He sounded like Bull Connor. Bradley made this point before the show because I said, doesn't he sound like a Southern... It's like if Hitler were born in South Carolina or something like that. Let's play this part about KFC. So I guess someone, Adam Friedland joked, guess Jerry's been in the writer's room, Jerry Seinfeld, because he had this stupid joke about, like, oh, look, the campus protesters, they're funded by Iran, obviously. And the kids with the blue-pink hair, they know nothing. It's indistinguishable from Republican far-right rhetoric. This guy's just been being given a blank check to do genocide. But he sounds like every Republican I've heard my entire life, the most racist ones. This is him speaking about the nationwide movement of campus protesters showing up to resist the genocide.
Anti-Israel protesters, many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas. They stand with rapists and murderers. They stand with people who came into the kibbutzim, into a home. The parents hid the children, the 2 babies, in the attic, in a secret attic. They murdered the families, the parents. They find the secret latch to the hidden attic, and then they murder the babies. These protesters stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Standing ovation for this. You see Cinema, Mansion. A lot of Democrats sitting. Why the hell did you attend? But can we skip to the joke? I think we started a little too early. 1 sec. But yeah, that was some other shots he took at the protesters. This was the one I was referencing before.
Some of these protesters, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing. Some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC.
Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum.
These protesters chant from the river to the sea, but many don't have a clue what river and what sea they're talking about.
College kids know nothing.
They not only get an F in geography, they get an F in history. They call Israel.
But that's exactly what you hear from Republicans all the time, right? About college kids they don't know anything. They don't know anything about this conflict. They don't know history. I mean, you heard this from Democrats too. But he's tailoring this to right-wing Democrats and the entire Republican Party.
it's you go back to the Vietnam War protests in the 1960s, okay? At the time, the US political elites were saying exactly the same thing. Oh, these people, these students, they don't know anything. They're so ignorant. They're so misinformed. And what happened? Just years later, those students were honored and they were valorized by their university administrations. And guess what's going to happen right now? The exact same thing is going to happen. Just as those protesters were later determined to be heroes, the same will be true of the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of students all around the US and in Europe and in Australia and in Mexico and elsewhere around the world. They will also be declared heroes for standing up in the face of a government and a Congress and a president and a Republican Party and a Democratic Party all complicit in genocide. The students are the heroes, and it's Netanyahu who is a genocidal maniac. What can you say here? I mean, on so many college campuses, students sacrificed so much at the University of Michigan. You had the campus police approach nonviolent students protesting a genocide, pepper spray them in the eyes, send multiple students into the hospital. We obviously recall what happened at Columbia, where they brutalized peaceful protesters, sending multiple students to the hospital, spraying skunk water and dangerous chemicals on them. You had a police in New York City fire off their weapon. That was the most danger any student faced was actually from a police officer firing their weapon. You had in places like Emory, you had 65-year-old Jewish studies professors attacked brutally by police. These people will go down as heroes, and it's the campus administrators, and it's the campus police, and it's the Congress and the president who will be remembered for what they are, which is genocidal maniacs.
Yep, absolutely. Let's play a little bit more of that, if we could just start from where we left off, because he does also then make this claim that I think is directly, or this lie, that I think is directly tailored to Christian Zionists and Christian theocrats in this country.
They stand with people who came into the kibbutzim, into a home.
No.
The parents hid the children, the two babies.
This is from the clip? Okay. All right, keep going then.
In the attic, in a secret attic. They murder the families,
Skip ahead.
the parents. They find the secret latch to the hidden attic, and then they murder the babies. These protesters stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves.
We just played this part. Yeah. Okay. I think we're trying to. If we could just. Do you have that Washington Post clip? Okay. Yeah. It's. I just wanted to play this one part.
For all we know,
yeah.
Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there. And throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots. And it's amazing, absolutely amazing. Some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying...
No. I want the part at the end. This is what's annoying, is like I'm trying to get to this particular part at the end. We gotta stop pausing it. All right, keep...
From the river to the sea, but many don't have a clue what river and what sea they're talking about. They not only get an F in geography, they get an F in history. They call Israel a colonialist state. Don't they know that the land of Israel is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob prayed, where Isaiah and Jeremiah preached, and where David and Solomon ruled?
Okay, that was the long way of getting to that part that I wanted to play. can you speak a little bit about the invocation of biblical prophecy, essentially, and claiming that Israel has a right to that land?
Okay, so whoever lived in Israel and Palestine 2,000 years ago, or 3,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, or 1,000 years ago has nothing to do, is completely unrelated to what Israel is doing in Gaza, and it's just so insidious. Honestly, it's the weaponization of Jewish history to manufacture consent for a genocide, and we see this consistently from Netanyahu over the course of many years, if not decades. Is this weaponization of Jewish history? And in fact, what I think it does is it endangers Jews around the world, because what you have is a prime minister. And it wasn't just in this segment here, claiming that he claimed that the accusations of genocide are thinly veiled attacks against Jews. He's claiming that describing Israel as an apartheid state, as a genocidal state, is anti-Semitic. So what if he's right? If he's right that saying Israel is a genocidal state is itself anti-Semitic, is itself an attack against Jews. He's saying that all Jews are collectively responsible for Israel's actions? That here I am sitting wherever I'm sitting in the world because I was born to a Jewish mother or Jewish father, or because I'm the grandchild of a Jewish grandparent, I am therefore somehow implicated in Israel's decision-making process? That is deeply anti-Semitic. And by instrumenting and weaponizing Jewish history, in order to manufacture consent for his genocide, he is endangering Jews wherever they are. He is directly empowering anti-Semites, and he's driving them to carry out anti-Semitic acts.
I think that's also the game that he plays, because then it can reinforce his ambitions, right? He's not interested in tamping down on anti-Semitism, because then he's able to use it as an excuse to commit whatever violence that he wants to. And that's why, like, comparing him to Hitler, I really have no problem with that. His intention is quite similar to other genociders and other colonial genociders as well in the past, because it doesn't inoculate him from claims of him being genocidal or one of the worst people to ever live because he's a Jewish person. He doesn't speak for Jewish people. He's not a representative for Jewish people, and he can still act as a Zionist genocidal maniac as a Jewish person, and that's just a fact. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say the most inspiring scenes, at least that I've seen in the past day or two, have been the hundreds of Jewish protesters taking over the U.S. Capitol, rejecting Netanyahu's visit and calling for a complete cessation of arms and weapons transfers to Israel. It's incredible. I mean, the Jews are some of the most outspoken activists, calling for an end to the genocide. I mean, if anything, you could say that Jews have been at the forefront of the ones calling on Israel to stop dropping bombs on Gaza. And so for him to then come here and say, in the name of the Jewish people, that you need to support Israel and you need to support Israel's genocidal war on Gaza, is just absolutely it's untenable from a logical point of view, and it's just morally repugnant from an ethical point of view.
Absolutely. Last clip here, and then we'll let you go, Zach. But I wanted to get you to wanted to get your expertise and for you to respond to this. Netanyahu here talks a bit about Iran and mentions that, or at least alludes to, after saying that the anti-genocide protests in this country are being funded by Iran. That's a lie. He also then seems to claim that he thinks that Iran could have been behind the botched assassination attempt, or the attempted assassination of Donald Trump from like a week and a half ago. This is insanity, but clearly designed to appeal to like the John Boltons and the neocons of the right wing. Here he is doing that.
1979, it stormed the American embassy. It held scores of Americans hostage for 444 days. Since then, Iran's terrorist proxies have targeted America in the Middle East and beyond. In Beirut, they killed 241 U.S. servicemen. In Africa, they bombed American embassies. In Iraq, they supplied explosives to maim and kill thousands of American soldiers. In America, they actually sent death squads. They sent death squads here to murder a former Secretary of State and a former National Security Advisor. And as we recently learned, they even brazenly threatened to assassinate President Trump. But Iran understands that to truly challenge America, it must first conquer the Middle East.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that sounds like you guys. You want to counter the Middle East. Iran is a boogeyman for Israelis, for Netanyahu, and in fact, for a lot of gullible U.S. politicians. Obama doesn't get enough credit for the Iran deal because people don't necessarily understand the power of the Israel lobby and how they attempted to, how they opposed it so vehemently, which was essentially trying to get Iran to denuclearize, normalizing with Iran, or not normalizing, but at least cooling tensions. And then we released a lot of the money that we had frozen of Iran's and eased sanctions on them in exchange. And this was a good deal, decreased antagonism, and then also prevented Iran from beginning to manufacture a nuclear weapon. Then Trump comes in, scraps it after Benjamin Netanyahu does some PowerPoint presentation press release where he lies, that Iran is cheating on the nuclear deal. And then Biden, as president, continues to further, honestly, the Trump-era foreign policy. If you could just give broader context about Iran as it relates to Israel and why Israel is so bullish on antagonizing Iran and being in conflict with them.
Well, I think at the most basic level, every time Israel talks about Iran, that's one less time they're talking about the Palestinians. Israel and Iran have no inherent conflict with each other. There's no disputed territory. There's no inherent reason for them to be in conflict at all. It's entirely, I think, a manufacturing of Israel in order to distract and deflect from its occupation and its apartheid and its genocide. But I think the broader issue here, and if you really ask yourself, what state in the Middle East is meddling in the United States, is trying to influence the U.S. and change the direction of U.S. politics, guess what? It's Israel. It's not Iran. According to New York Times reporting from early June, Israel is secretly targeting U.S. lawmakers with a social media campaign, manufacturing all of these fake accounts, using ChatGPT to manufacture false stories, and to have soft power on U.S. elections. And that is the state of Israel doing that, using their Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. It's the state of Israel that is carrying out attacks against Iran's embassy in Syria, slaughtering 13 people. It's Israel that is attacking Yemen. It's Israel that is attacking Lebanon. It's Israel that is attacking Syria. It's Israel that is a menace in the Middle East. And,
Right.
and so I think so whenever you hear Israel talk about Iran, I mean, this has been Netanyahu's mantra for decades. I mean, you can go back to the 90s where he's trying to get the world to pay impose sanctions on Iran, to focus on Iran, to start a war with Iran. That's a Netanyahu wet dream, is to pull the United States into an Israel-U.S. war with Iran. And this will distract the entire world from what is actually happening on the ground in Israel and Palestine, which is occupation, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. And that's what this is all about. And that's what we saw, by the way, for 14 days was it in May, with this Israel-Iran spat. It was the same thing. The world completely lost the focus on the genocide. For 2 weeks, you didn't have a single story on Gaza. Everything was about this Israel-Iran spat. And that's what this is all about. It's distraction, deflection, and it's continuing.
Well, it's also designed to bring the United States into the fold in an even more active way, potentially, because there is such long-standing desire by neocons within the United States to go to war with Iran, because of oil ambitions, because of a lot of, I mean, we did a coup there in the 1950s, and there's still people who want basically Iran to have a United States kind of puppet leader in the same way that other countries have. John Schwartz reposted this. This was after 9/11, and I was struck by it. There were estimates at the time that tens of thousands of Americans may have died, like on 9/11. That's what some people thought happened on the day. Obviously, that didn't end up happening, but there were a lot of fears. Netanyahu's immediate reaction was, quote, "It's very good." And then he walks it back. Well, not very good, but it will generate immediate sympathy. He predicted that the attack would, quote, "strengthen the bond between our two peoples because we've experienced terror over so many decades, but the United States has now experienced a massive hemorrhaging of terror." Point being, he was a little too honest at the beginning there, where he was happy about the fact that the United States was attacked by terrorists from the Middle East because it could draw the United States into aiding Israel's ambitions, killing more Muslims in the Middle East. And in the end, Netanyahu, from Pennsylvania in many ways and lived a lot of his life there, he's just an old school far-right American neocon. Full stop.
That's exactly correct. He has been, for decades, trying to liken Israel's adversaries to the United States' adversaries, right? We of course, he's going to believe that the 9/11 attack on U.S. soil is going to serve Israel's interests because it's going to provide him even more fodder for his false associations. It's going to make it much easier for him to portray, the big bad evil Islamic threat, right? And that's been the approach from 9/11 to the present. And you might even say, by the way, that's why there was so much more support for Israel during the second Intifada in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, when Israel was committing mass murder in the West Bank and Gaza on a daily basis, killing 3,000 Palestinians in those 4 years from late 2000 to 2005. And again, the American public was fooled into thinking, well, Israel and the United States have this shared, a bond, this sort of shared enemy. It's Islamic terror, right? And that refrain carries. We see that all the way to the present day with the attempts to liken Hamas to ISIS. So this is kind of music to Netanyahu's ears, but in fact, it's a total distortion of reality.
Well, Zach, thank you so much for your time. Everyone should follow the Palestine Nexus newsletter. Zach and other historians update that all the time. And where else can people find your writing and your work?
Yeah, so you can follow the newsletter. That's PalestineNexus.com. I'm very active on Twitter _Zach Foster.
And we will put a link to both of those things, your Twitter and your newsletter, in the description below and at majority.fm. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Zach. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. With that, we are going to wrap up the first part of this program, the free half, head into the fun half. The number is 646-257-3920. Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning will have David Griscom and I are going to be doing a little reading of a Hal Draper piece for patrons, patreon.com/Left Reckoning. Hal Draper is a really good American socialist, Marxist. Also talking with Sean K.B. of the Antifada on Sean O'Brien's speech at the RNC, so check that out. Sean KB got people a little bit upset, but I think he has an interesting take on it, so check that out next week.
ESPN, we are off this week, but we will be back next week talking about many things. Do we have Binder and Brandon?
Let's see here.
We have Brandon. Oh. It's all good. Is Brandon a little loud?
Bring him
down just slightly. You sound good.
Sorry, I'll whisper like this.
Then it's just like you sound like Biden. We'll be able to hear every like gulp and swirl of saliva if that's the case.
Oh, my mouth is wet a lot, so I need to work on that for sure.
I think you're fine. What's happening on the discourse?
I'm insecure about it, but so we'll have an episode out for you either this weekend or early next week about the dropping out of Biden and the presumptive nomination of Kamala Harris. And I'll have a little bit more movie stuff out for you as well. So, congrats. You'll have a lot to listen to. Thank you. Is that coconut dropping?
Yes. Yep. Coconut bonking. Okay. Let's be real.
It's dropping into the context that preceded it.
I feel like Donkey Kong with all these coconuts just dropping around me.
Yep.
All right. Well, do we have Binder or not quite yet? All right. Check out Doom. Check out the check out Doom. Do check out the discourse. Doomed, Scam Economy, Leftist Mafia. See you in the fun half.
Okay, Emma, please.
Well, I feel that my voice is sorely lacking on the majority report.
Wait, look, Sam is unpopular.
I do deserve a vacation at Disney World. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Emma to the show.
It is Thursday.
I think you need to take over for Sam.
Yes, please.
No. I'm gonna pause you right there.
Wait, what?
You can't encourage Emma to live like this. And I'll tell you why. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
What?
Tour, sushi, and poker.
Tim's upset?
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. She was offered a tour, sushi, and...
that's what we call it in the biz.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Right.
Tour, sushi, and poker.
We're gonna get demonetized.
I just think that what you did to Tim Pool was mean.
Free speech.
That's not what we're about here. Well, look at how sad he's become now. You shouldn't even talk about it because I think you're responsible.
I probably am in a certain way, but let's get to the meltdown here.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Oh my God.
Tour,
wow.
Sushi. I'm sorry, I'm losing my fucking mind. She was offered a tour, sushi, and poker with the boys.
Logic.
Tour, sushi, and poker with the boys. Boy. Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour.
I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a little kid.
I had this debate 7,000 times.
A little kid. I think I'm like a little kid. I think I'm like a kid.
Tour. I'm losing my fucking mind.
Some people just don't understand.
So I'm not trying to be a dick right now, but like,
I absolutely think the U.S. should be providing me with a wife and kids.
That's not what we're talking about here. Okay, all right.
It's not a fun job.
Tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. Willy Wonka tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. That's a tour? A real thing. That's real thing. Real thing. What's that offered a tour?
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Rogan has done it again.
That offered a tour? That's a real thing. That's poker with the boys.
I think he might be blowing it out of proportion.
Real thing. That's poker with the boys.